Hello and welcome to another episode of Alright, let me go ahead and read from Colossians 2:18. Let no man beguile you of your reward in a voluntary humility and worshipping of angels, intruding into things which he hath not seen, vainly puffed up in his fleshly mind. Alright, today I'm going to give a reaction to a debate of William Lane Craig versus Sean Carroll. I'm saying a reaction, not a review. I watched it, but, it's been a day or two since, and, I just didn't have a whole lot of time, and kind of wanted to focus my own points, so I'm giving a reaction to that debate. And basically, the debate centered around cosmology. William Lane Craig is a Christian apologist and philosopher, and Sean Carroll is a physicist. I'm sure there's other titles they'd probably wear and all that kind of fun stuff, but basically that's kind of what we're going with. And what they did was they were asking the question if God can be used, or if modern cosmology can be used as evidence for God. And so they were dealing a lot with mostly the Big Bang Theory. It's been altered many times, but that would probably be the rough draft. Okay, I mean, there's other nuances and stuff like that. And basically, the question is, can you, develop cosmology and, to where there is no God? Well, basically, what William Lane Craig is going to do, he's going to use the cosmological argument that was popularized by Thomas Aquinas, but he does a Arabic version of it called the Kalam cosmological argument, and that's everything which begins to exist has to have a cause. I think there's a third line there, but you get the gist. So, by the fact that it's beginning to exist, it has a cause. Now, I think it'd probably be better, at this point in history, because, we're talking about cosmology and stuff. People are going to have all these different models, okay? These models are going to change over time. If you're going to make this argument, I won't even make this argument, I'll tell you why in a minute. But if you're going to make this argument, I would kind of go with the unmoved mover argument instead of strictly, so everything caused, one point and stuff. The developers of the Big Bang Theory and stuff, a lot of them were, kind of using a deist idea, and they were kind of coming from a Roman Catholic background, and so, everything kind of fits in with Aristotle, but I really don't think that that's where we're going to end up. But basically, these scientific models are made by naturalists. They're designed by naturalists. Strong enough for a Christian, but pH balanced for an atheist. So, basically, Sean Carroll, he's going to, focus on these nuances of how these things are operating from an atheistic standpoint. But that atheism is going to contradict itself. I mean, it's going to say that nature is all there is, and everything goes by the laws of nature, but then the laws of nature have a point of existence, and so then you have to say, well, what about, the origin of the laws of science? Who made the laws of science? Well, he's kind of going with the multiverse theory, and that's, there was a mom universe and a daddy universe, and many universes made other universes. And I'm joking and yet telling the truth at the same time. Basically, these universes somehow give birth to other universes. So, when they do that, they say, well, let's just assume, what we know. And what we know is that the universe is, 16 billion light years of what we've observed so far. This is where I think the problem is, and this is why, I disagree with both William Lane Craig and Sean Carroll. because I don't believe that I have to make that assumption. And let me just say one more thing, though. As far as like with William Lane Craig, I think he argues his point pretty well, and I believe that argument can be made, for instance, against an atheist affirmation of truth. But I think, Sean did a very good oratory debate. I think he went too fast and got things too complicated, but I think that's probably what you want because your argument's not that good. So you don't want you to understand his arguments, otherwise they fail. But basically, he did good criticism, and one thing he was like talking about, well, theism is poorly defined. And what that means is there's many different definitions to God, and which one are you using? Now, me, I would go with my confession of faith. I'd say the God of the Bible, and here's what I believe about the God of the Bible, and here's a scripture that backs that up. But, that's not the argument. The argument's for a God. You see, you can make good arguments for a God. The problem is that you cannot prove a God because he's poorly defined. That's why I try to defend the God of the Bible and the Bible itself. I try to defend every single part of it. I want the whole enchilada. If you give only half of the system, then you're giving a bunch of loopholes that can be destroyed because it's no longer consistent, because it's no longer complete. If you want to argue for half of God, then you're not arguing for Christianity. So basically, we go back to it, and they want to fit God into a pagan universe, okay? Because that's ultimately where it is. Like when you have the naturalism and stuff, you're making pagan assumptions. Matter is the end-all, be-all. That's a pagan assumption. So basically, are we going to be able to fit God into that? And I think that at this point, Carroll makes a good point, and that's why I have issues with William Lane Craig's construction. But, I go back to my point. How do we know the universe is as big as they claim it to be? See, if, let's say, like, we're sitting and we're standing, okay, no, we're not sitting. We're standing on this road, okay? And I've got your ankles pitched down, ball and chain, and all that kind of stuff. You're way down, and you cannot travel on the road. And the road goes farther than you can see. And you see this rope going all the way up the road, farther than you can see. Two men come up to you. One says, well, that's about 5,000 feet. Another guy says, no, that's about 500 miles. Can you tell me, without the ability to go up and check yourself, are you able to know how long that rope is? I would argue that you can't. That's what we call the inductive fallacy. You cannot know anything past your observations. Okay, and this is where cosmology and modern cosmology goes. They kind of says, well, let's make something up. I don't care about your fantasy. That's the problem. We're all talking about fantasies here. So, basically, when you look out into space, you say, well, I'm going to look out and I got this big giant telescope. Okay, and the big giant telescope's got to take this little point, it's going to make it bigger, 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 it's going to make it bigger. But, how do you know if something is close to you or it's far away? Okay? Because sometimes when we do this, it's like you're not able to determine the difference of space. Am I making a triangle? Or are they farther apart? There was a astronomer named Halton Arp. And basically he took some pictures. And he took some pictures of some galaxies through the Hubble telescope. And some detecting the radar. I guess it was infrared. I forget. Maybe it was ultraviolet. But they detected the microwaves that were in the universe. And there would be microwaves around these galaxies. But the microwaves would affect stars that scientists had assumed were light years and like 30, 40, 100 light years apart. Okay. And, if light travels at 185,000 miles per second, and we're talking about a year as opposed to a second, we're talking astronomical figures that you don't even comprehend these distances that they're talking about. Well, all of a sudden they're together, and it looks like, hey, hold on, they got to be close together because they're connected by all this radiation. You see, we can't really know those things that we haven't observed. We've never been outside of our solar system. Okay, our satellites have not been outside of our solar system. We've never been past the moon. It might be something to where if you see an object, you think, oh, well, it's 100 miles away, but maybe it's closer, and it's just bigger than what you thought. So, or smaller. Yeah, it's closer to smaller. So, we have to kind of see what's going on. The other day, I was driving down the street, and it had just rained, and, they always talk about, like, rainbows and stuff like that, but this wasn't like a rainbow. What it was is it looked like I saw the sun directly ahead of me. But then I looked over the right, and I see the sun. What was directly ahead of me? It was a cloud that had been reflecting the light of the sun. It was reflecting it very well. You see, we don't know if the light that we see is actually the object that we're seeing. Okay? Do we know if the star is actually there, especially if it's as many light years as they say? If it's 15 billion light years away, is it really right here? Or is it already wrapped around and you see it over here? Okay? See, when we start talking these distance, there's a curvature. Let me give you another illustration. Over in Bowling Green, Kentucky, they have a really nice place, like a lost cave river thing, and you can check it out. And outside of the river, they have the shortest, deepest lake in the world. And they went to measure this lake, and it went, at first they saw it was like 200 feet, and 300, and then 600, and then they started getting around to 1,000. And, it's like something that's not making sense. And they finally figured out that it wasn't going straight down anymore. It had gotten into an underground river. So it seems like it was like the deepest thing because it was going across a river instead of going straight down. Well, that's what happens when we're looking at space. There's a curvature of space. Okay, and you start looking out, and the farther you look out, the more you'll start to curve, and you're actually looking down and around and all that kind of stuff. So, basically, how do we know the stars are even there? We're looking with the Hubble telescope. That's looking at light that we don't see. So that's light that we haven't observed. We're just going past it. But is that light that's reflecting? Is that like a star that's even there anymore? Is that like a star that's actually what we saw, but we looked at it on the other side of the world? Okay? Everything becomes relative. So how do we know exactly how big space is? It might not be this big, it might be that big. And yes, it could be that big. So you see, once we get to that, we get to a world that we are not certain of, in a world that we can't tell. And so this is where we get into a problem. I think also there's a lot of things that we assume with that. Both these guys are assuming Big Bang Theory. One's atheist, one's a Christian. And they just assume the Big Bang Theory right off the top. But I'm not going to bring up the obvious. The obvious would be, hold on, what about the 6 days of creation? Let me bring this up to you. This is 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 39. He says, all flesh is not the same flesh, but there is one kind of flesh of men, another flesh of beasts, another of fishes, others birds. Of course, that goes directly against evolution. And you think, well, no, we're just talking about Big Bang Theory, but we'll read on. There are also celestial bodies and bodies terrestrial. But the glory of the celestial is one, and the glory of the terrestrial is another. There is one glory of the sun, and another glory of the moon. So those are two different designs, two different things, and another glory of the stars. And for one star differeth from another star in glory. But you see, in the Big Bang Theory, everything kind of is like radiation, and it all kind of comes out of the same substance. And the planets are originally either part star or the product of a star or something like that. And, we just assume that the planets have evolved. One guy, Dr. Robert Gentry, made a discovery of finding radio halos and radiation in rock-hard granite. And the problem is that if the Earth was a fireball and it was all lava, then the radiation would leak out. Why was there radiation in rock-hard granite? Granite's not radioactive. And you think, well, but it flowed in some way. Well, if it was flowing, then it would be escaping. Anytime the substance is flowing, then the radiation should be escaping. It can't be captured. The only way that it was captured in rock-hard granite is if it came there simultaneously. So where did the radiation come from? Well, it probably came there when God created the earth, instantaneously. So there's a lot of different arguments. People brought up the issue of moon dust. Moon dust was the fact that NASA had assumed that the moon would be covered in dust back in the 50s. They assumed that there'd be all this dust because the moon's gravity picking up all the space dust. So they just assumed that everything would be, a foot or two thick because the moon is so old. It turned out it was only like maybe a half inch to an inch deep of moon dust. Now, NASA just changed their calculations and they said, oh, we figured it out, we're not worried about it. And you creationists are so stupid. That doesn't prove that the moon is young. Well, what it does prove is that assuming a uniformitarian structure, then, the naturalists would have assumed that it was that thick. Okay, that was their guess, and their guess failed. That was their prediction. Their prediction failed. And yeah, I'm glad that you got smart, but basically it doesn't really work. This whole universe, the stars are burning for billions and billions of years, and we can keep on adding more billions of years that they're burning, and they'll never burn out. Some of these ideas, they just don't make any sense. And so, when I have a Christian worldview, I try to go by the Bible. And, when it comes to, the naturalistic world, I'm a naturalistic liberal. I don't believe that they're always right, that their calculations always work. I'm a little bit more free-spirit about that. So, that's the thing. It's like me being a servant of Christ makes me free from the ideas of man.